So Jalil, thank you for coming today. Could you give me an overview of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I started animation and I started working in the animation industry about 10 years ago, 2004. My first job was Chronicles of Narnia at Rhythm & Studios. Then I went on to work on Garfield 2, Now the Museum, and Charlotte's Web. Then in 2006, I decided to leave Rhythm & Hughes and move to Weta down in New Zealand. And my first project there was The Water Horse. I worked on that and then went on to work on Avatar and Rise of the Planet of the Apes and Tintin. And after which I left Weta to move to Dreamworks Animation. And my first project there was Rise of the Guardians, and then I moved into How to Train Your Dragon 2, and now I'm on a different project.
And why did you choose animation?
Actually, I did not really choose animation. I wanted to be an illustrator. I wanted to do comic books. I did not really know animation was actually possible. You know, I'd never thought. You know, when I used to watch cartoons when I was a kid, and for me, animation has always been, you know, done by angels out there. You know, not people that you can actually meet and talk to. I didn't know it was done by actual people that sit behind a desk and work. You know, I never understood how it was done when I was a kid. So when I was going to college, to me, I never even thought of animation. To me, that was impossible to do. For me, I wanted to do drawings because I could do that. I see this every day. I could do that. Where I'm from in Mauritius, you don't see animators. We've never seen them. You know, though I see people that draw every day. So I knew I could do that. So I went to school for illustration, and I went to college. Actually, I went to Singapore to study engineering for a couple of years, and realized engineering is not for me. Then I went to Edinburgh University in Pennsylvania to do illustrations. You know, I wanted to just do a BFA in art. You know, and so when I got there, that I realized, oh wow, I want to do animation. In my first year, I started looking at students doing animation, drawings, and gestures. I'm like, you can see your drawings come to life. That's better than drawing, you know. So, and then I met my instructor there, Michael Gans, who's, you know, I was so inspired by. You know, he worked at Disney for about 10 years before that. He was one of the animators on Zeus and Hera, you know, from Hercules, you know, and I was so inspired by what he was doing, and I said I wanted to be like him when I grew up, you know. Yeah. So I worked really hard, you know, and then realized that animation was what I wanted to do, you know. So I went straight for it at that point.
And if we look at your reel and your career overall, you've been working a lot with creatures.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't think I chose that, but I think I would have chosen it if I was given a choice. You know, I fell into it. I wanted to do cartoons. You know, since school I wanted to do cartoons, but I realized that since growing up, I always liked to draw monsters and not human beings. I never liked to draw a person or a girl or a hero. I never liked to draw the hero. I always liked to draw the villains. I always wanted to draw the monsters, the deformed. I loved the Hulk because he was all deformed. I liked the Swamp Thing because he was all deformed. You know, I like Toxic Crusaders because they were all weird, and Ninja Turtles. You know, again, they are heroes, but they're the dark heroes. You know, they are a little more deformed. So for me, you know, it's always been monsters. It's always been dragons. For some reason, I love dragons. I grew up loving dragons. So when I went to Weta and I got to work on Avatar, to me that was a dream come true because I got to work on these flying creatures, you know. And then of course I came to Dreamworks to work on dragons too, which was, you know, incredible. But it's always been monsters for me, you know. That's why it's mostly creatures. But now I'm trying to branch out, you know, like, you know, Rise of the Guardians. I got to learn a little bit more to do something more different. Especially now I'm working on a film which is completely cartoony. You know, no dragons or no monsters at all. But animation's animation, I guess. Yeah.
Since you've worked on character, mainly creatures, and then cartoon, do you approach your animation differently? Do you look at different things when you're blocking out your shot?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I find myself blocking a shot differently depending on the kind of shot that I have. You know, for example, on How to Train Your Dragon 2, as I was blocking the Bewilderbeast fighting Toothless, they were very different because Toothless is tiny, small, fast and quick. The Bewilderbeast is heavy, large, slow. So blocking these two characters already puts you in a place where you can't block them the same way. If I'm blocking Toothless on step mode, I cannot block the Bewilderbeast step mode because I'll have a pose every 20 frames or every 30 frames, and it might not work as well. So I find myself blocking them way in a different way. One I was blocking in spline, and one I was blocking in step mode. So preparing between creatures and cartoon is a whole different world of blocking or planning. Creatures is more, I go with it more as a feel. I block my animation. I don't really think in terms of what is the character going to feel at that moment. I go how is the animal going to react, because animals are instinctive. They don't think about what they're going to do. When a dog's about to bite you, they're not thinking, I'm going to bite you. No, they're just reacting to their instinct. That's how animals do, and that's how I animate creatures. I go into it instinctively. What is the creature going to do in this moment? I start throwing poses. I don't think too much about it. I let it go. You can't do, character animation, acting like that. You've got to plan it out. You got to know, because there's all subtext with characters thinking what they're about to say. There's none of that in for animals. So it's definitely a way different, style of planning. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you talk about dragons, from how did you train your dragon, there's more of a thought process behind their motion. How did you show it with limited controls, because they don't have the same morphology than we do? Right.
I mean, you look at Wallace and Gromit. Gromit is he doesn't talk, he doesn't speak. It's all eyebrows. There's so much we could do with the eyes and the eyebrows, and most animators use that as their main focus. Especially even when I am animating a character, like a character who's about to say something. I don't animate the mouth first, I start with the eyes and the eyebrows. I make sure the emotion comes through that first. If you can do this, you've got it. Because lip sync is just lip sync, If you just have lip sync, you can't quite always tell what the emotion of the character is. But if you have the upper face, you have the eyes and the eyebrows, you can tell without the mouth what the character is thinking. So Toothless is all that, it's a very appealing character that, that is just like especially Toothless is very much, you connect with it because it's almost like a dog or a cat. I think the first film was more of a cat. I think the second film became more of a mixture of a dog and cats. And I think we all relate to that because we all have pets, we all have dogs and cats. But there are moments where he had human emotions, definitely. And again, using the eyes and the eyebrows, you can convey that.
You're used to keyframe animation now, without a Change Your Dragon and more at DreamWorks, but you've worked also on Avatar. Do you think it's more challenging
at DreamWorks than it was at Weta?
And no, more at Weta, because you have to adapt more to the constraints of the live plate and motion capture.
Right. I mean, it has limitations and restrictions. I wouldn't say that it's more challenging. I think they are equally challenging. When you work on a live action film, there's more stuff to think about when you're planning a shot, because the camera is moving a certain way. You can't change it because they've already filmed it. It's a live action plate. You can't just go change the camera. There are limitations to that. Where at DreamWorks, you can actually tweak the camera because your animation goes off screen. I'll tweak the camera. You can't do this in live action. You are stuck with it. Working with the motion capture, yes, Avatar had a lot of motion capture. Obviously, we didn't. Not everybody touched too much motion capture. I did do some motion capture as well, but it wasn't. We do have a motion capture team that would handle most of the motion capture. We had to, if motion capture data comes to us, it's usually to animate fingers, tails, ears, facials. A lot of the facials actually keyframed. A lot of it was we took the data that they give us and we pushed it, because you have to push all that facial for it to read. You can't just raw data and it doesn't usually look great. You're on Uncanny Valley. You need to go and push it and make it a little more exaggerated for it to really sink. But I wouldn't say it was more challenging or less challenging. I would say it's equally in different ways. You have different limitations at DreamWorks working on a feature animation.
On your resume, you sure can see your progression. You started as an animator, then a senior animator, and now you're a lead. Do you animate anymore?
Yes. It depends. And again, as leads are different in different companies. When I was at Weta, leads don't really animate. You know, we are more managers, and then, you know, we're more, you know, do this, you know, give notes, you know, take this note and do it there, you know, make sure the animators are doing this, you know, get a scene together, you know. It was less animation, more management, and I really missed animation as a lead there. It was an amazing experience because you get to go to all the meetings with all the, you know, all the directors and the producers, maybe not the directors, but, you know, all the guys that understand what's happening behind the frame. You know, you get to learn about the management of all this. Dreamworks is different. You get to animate. Dreamworks, as a lead, you have to animate more than probably just as a senior animator. You know?
Yeah.
Even as a supervisor, you get to animate way more. It's a different way of thinking. You know, as a lead at DreamWorks, you know, I got my character, and I had to do all the bigger shots. While at Weta, you know, I did small stuff. You know, I was doing stuff that no one else wants to do as a lead, because you want to give the best animators that have time, you know, to do this. It's different philosophies, you know, in different places.
Well, so at DreamWorks, you're creating the shots that are going to be the example for the rest of the movie.
Exactly. You probably, as the lead of a character, I was a character lead on How to Train Your Dragon, and as a character lead, you define the performance of the character. So you would probably be doing the first few shots that everybody will follow. You know, you set the character, and then everyone follows. Everyone that comes into your team or comes into the character will follow that. Yeah.
Are you the one testing the rig, wrecking the rig before
Absolutely.
production?
Yeah. So you're the one that does the first few tests as you're testing the rig, you know, with the rigger. So you work close with the rigger, you know, you add controls, take controls out, you know, fix things that don't work, you know. You'll try performances and see how the rig, you know, adapts to it, and if it breaks, you know, you'll work with the rigger to get it fixed.
And since you start on a project in pre-production, do you have any impact on story or how we define a character?
It's two different things. I think, you know, if definitely not on story. I don't think as an animator or as a lead or even as a soup, you don't have much say in terms of story. You can have an idea and you can say it, you know, in front of your director. Maybe he'll like it, but, you know, usually you don't have a say. I would say 95%. You know, of the time you don't. 97% of the time you don't have a say in the story. They have story departments that take care of things. You know, they work on things. But defining a character, absolutely. You know, especially if you're a character lead, you define the character. You define the performance of the character. You'll define. You know, you can discuss with the director, you know, what his vision of the character is, and you can put your own, you know, in the character. So it's actually really good, you know, for character development. You know, we do have a say in that. You know, some films, you know, they give us more freedom, and some films maybe not as much. For example, if you're doing a sequel, you know, you've already defined the character in the previous film, so you can't redefine the character. Like Hiccup, you couldn't recreate him, but the good thing about Hiccup is he was growing up, so he was changing. We had some liberty, but, you know, we couldn't go back to the old style of moving a lot Hiccup, you know, from the first film. So you have to change, you have to adapt. But usually, like Poe, for example, you know, it's probably a little more dangerous. You can just change him. But for new characters, go for it. You know, define the character. And usually the animators, the lead animators, the supervisors will be doing that. You know, they'll define the performance of the character.
If you've got a few characters in a shot, how do you manage to keep their persona, their characteristic? How do you manage to animate them really differently, even though it's the same style?
Well, usually what they do is, if it's a big shot with two main characters, sometimes they'll split it. They'll give it to a person that's good at one character, and then the person that's good at the other character, maybe the leads, or, you know, maybe animators that have on the teams. But for the most part, they will give the shot to one person to do. Then that one person, what they have to do is they have to make sure they are in touch with both supervisors or both character leads, or the character leads or the supervisors will work closely with that animator to make sure the performances are, you know, on model. You know, make sure that Hiccup doesn't turn into something else. You know, so it's tricky because the animator has to make sure that Astrid feels like Astrid and Hiccup feels like Hiccup in the same shot. It does get tricky, but that's the challenge of the job, right? You got to make sure that each characters feel like who they are. You know, you can't animate them the same way.
As an animator, we perceive animation in a different way. What is animation in a few words for you?
What is animation in a few words for me?
Yeah.
Wow. Animation is the art of motion. You know, it's about how you feel when you see something move. it's not just, I don't see it as just a performance or an acting. It's how do you feel when you see it move. For me, my love for animation comes from seeing beautiful arcs and elegant motion, you know. It's only way later on that I learned that, oh, you can do a performance out of this. You can get an acting, you know, you can get somebody. But for me, animation has always been just motion, you know, just how I feel when I see something move. And yeah, you know, something that's just, it can be abstract to me. That's awesome. I love that. But you know, nowadays, you know, we are trying to, you know, turn animation in, well, not turn, it's always been like that, but nowadays really the focus on performance and acting and less on the actual motion, the elegance of the motion, you know, which I feel like now we should bring that back in all our films, you know, not go too motion cappy, not go too realistic, you know, get back that art, that form, that feeling of motion, which I feel like we're losing a little bit. Yeah.
And what's next for you?
What's next for me?
Yeah.
Well, cool. I am actually moving on to trying to do some video games. I actually built a company with a few colleagues, you know, called Steamroller Studios, and we are working on a video game right now called Deadwood that comes out in a year or two, and it's you know, it's very challenging. It's something we're doing on our own time because we work at Weta Dreamworks, and so we're gonna take some time off from our main job, you know, take a sabbatical, you know, a few months off, and focus on the game and see where that goes. You know, we all love playing video games, and we just want to let's just try and make a game of our own and see how that goes. So that's my goal right now, to try and get the game done and see where that goes. You know.
Nice. Is your approach different since it's gameplay animation? It's animation that is for the player, the experience instead of the quality?
Yeah, I'm learning so much of how to make games, you know, while I'm doing this, because it's not about animation anymore. It's not about motion anymore. It's about gameplay. It's about when you put this controller in this player's hand, what they're gonna feel when they move it. It's such a different world, you know. When I started the game, we started animating. I did a full animated character, and as you're playing it, everything is flowing into each other. It's not a game you can play. It's a great game that looks nice, but it's not responsive. Everything is sluggish. It moves too much. There's too much overlapping. It's too much of that, but it's beautiful. But gaming is about gameplay. What the player needs to be able to feel like they're in the game, feel like they have full control of it. So you have to play with all that limitation, still make it look good, but take away all that extra animation, which is the goodness of animation, all that extra overlap stuff. That's what makes animation so pretty. So it's an amazing challenge, and I'm loving it. You know, take all that stuff out, just pose, see what I can use, what I don't need to use. It's beautiful. It's our game, so we can do whatever we want. No one's telling us what not to do. So we can be perfectionists if we want to, or let it rough if we don't want to. But it's been a lot of fun, you know, a lot of learning. But yeah, it's been amazing.
And how did you manage to learn how to break it down into animation trees and cycles and little bits and pieces of motion instead of a nice sequence?
How do I learn how to do that?
Well, what's your approach? How did you learn to do it?
The thing is, what we did is we sat down and we decided what is the character gonna do? You know, is the character gonna turn around? You know, run forward, run sideways. We wanted our character to be very animated. We wanted the character to be very fluid. So, and I'm like, okay, if I can't do it with full animation, there has to be other ways to do it. So we decided, you know, when you move your character forward, he moves forward. When you turn him around, the character spins around and keeps going forward, down. We said, no, how about the character run backwards? Like, all right. So we did the character run backwards, and we're like, how about run sideways? We got into this thing where the character now runs sideways, to the left, to the right, backwards. It's very animated, but still will give control. It's a lot more extra animation that you would do in a normal game, but we wanted the players to feel like it's really cartoony, it's really feeling right, without taking away from the responsiveness of the game. So we're learning as we're going. There's no rules for that, you know. We're learning, okay, we do something, it's too long, okay, we cut it right there. Like, for example, the character jumping. I animated the character jumping. Then I'm like, wait a second, how does that work? So when I press the button, it goes up, but when I release it, falls down, but it can't follow the full animation. So then we have to cut it in three. A jump, in the air, and then a land, so that you can jump, stay in the air for a long time, and then land. So all that stuff we didn't know until we were learning as we were making it. It's awesome. It's really, really fun.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time
to
talk
absolutely.
with me.
It was
really
a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
No problem, man.